Hello. Okay, so I'm about to introduce you to your planning booklet, which is a big document that you will get a printed copy of when I get to you, but for now it will be electronic. And part of that is looking at students' work that has already been marked. And the reason we're going to do that is because one of the questions in your practical exam is writing a plan, so you plan an investigation. And I don't want to start you writing them until you've seen what a good one looks like and what a bad one looks like, because otherwise you're not really going to know how to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at students' work. We're going to mark it using a mark scheme. So that you can see what a good one looks like and what a bad one looks like. Once we've done that, we're going to look at how you should structure your plan in the exam. Then we are going to look at common ideas that come up each year, and then after that, once we've done all of those things, we will just practice lots and lots of planning questions, and it's likely that lots of those will be your homeworks. So I've got a past paper question for you here. A student is investigating resistors connected in parallel, so we know it's an electricity planning question. You're given a list of apparatus that you're to be able to use. You can have an ammeter, a voltmeter, a power supply, a variable resistor, a switch, connecting leads, and a box of identical resistors. So the question says, plan an experiment to investigate how the combined resistance of the resistors, that's these ones here, connected in parallel, depends on the number of resistors. You are not required to carry out this investigation, so there's no practical to do in this question, even though it is in your practical exam. The last question, there are 4 questions in the exam. The last one is always a plan, and it's always worth 7 marks. So you should draw a diagram of the circuit that you could use to determine the resistance of resistors connected in parallel. And then it says show only 2 resistors in your diagram. It then asks you to explain briefly how you would carry out the investigation, so write a method. And then lastly it asks you to draw a table with column headings. Okay, so that says that you need to know what you're measuring and the units of them to show how you would display your reading. You're not required to put any values into the table. Okay, so you're just drawing an empty table. So now I'm going to show you the mark scheme. Let me just move this down and move the lighting. 1 second. Just get that a bit better. Sorry, it's dark over here while I'm filming this. Okay, so there are 7 marks to be gained in a plan, always, every year. The first mark will always come from your diagram, so always start with the diagram. On your circuit diagram you should have 1 voltmeter in parallel with any of the components. The second marking point comes from your circuit diagram being correct. So you basically get 2 out of 7 marks just from your diagram. They're very kind, they give 1 for just placing the voltmeter in the right way and the other for it being the right circuit. Then your third mark, you have to have the correct symbols, so you need to remember those, for an ammeter, a voltmeter and a fixed resistor. The 4th marking point, and this is often the 4th marking point on any of the practicals, is that you say that you take repeat readings with a different number of resistors, so changing your independent variable. 5th marking point, drawing a table that includes columns for numbers of resistors, voltage and current. Now what I've done here is I've just highlighted that the way CIE mark in tables and headings is your unit should always have followed a / and not brackets. So quite often students will put the unit in brackets in a table, but for CIE Physics you absolutely need a /. Okay, and then the last 2 points come from a list. So if you had any 2 of these points here, you would have gained 2 marks. If you wrote all 5 things, you still would only get 2 marks. So if you show how you would calculate resistance, you would get a mark. If you show a safety consideration, so to use low current to stop resistors from getting hot, you'd get a mark. If you state that you use 5 combinations, you will get a mark. Now the reason for that is because you take your readings, don't you, and you plot them on a graph. To get a good line of best fit, the minimum number of points you need is 5. Okay, any less than that and it's hard to draw a line of best fit. And that's just checking that you know that. You could have said that you would repeat with different current or voltage or variable resistor settings. That would extend the investigation. And you should hopefully always say in a plan what you would plot on a graph. That would be a good thing to say. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn this over, and you will see in your booklet I've put a table for 3 students who have each answered that question. And what you need to do is you need to use the mark scheme here to decide how many marks they got out of 7. And you need to say what they would need to do to get more marks. Now I'm going to do student 1 for you to show you how to do it. And then once I've done that, you are then going to go and read student 2 and student 3's answers. Okay, so we know that the first few marking points come from the diagram. Okay, so the first marking point was to do with the voltmeter being in parallel with any of the components. Now you can hopefully see they've actually got 2 diagrams, which is a little bit confusing. You should really only draw one. You should see that the voltmeter has been put in parallel here with a variable resistor, and it has been put in parallel again here. Okay, so MP1 has been achieved. If we look back at the mark scheme, MP1 is 1 voltmeter in parallel with any component. Now MP2 said that the circuit diagram would correctly show the power supply, ammeter and 2 or more resistors in parallel. Now you can see here we do have 2 resistors in parallel, but on the 3rd branch they've actually put a variable resistor. So this is a normal resistor that's fixed, has a fixed value, and this is a variable resistor. Okay, so that's not correct because we aren't asked to put a variable resistor in. Okay, so they may list things in the question that you don't need. So there's a variable resistor here, but they are checking that you know what you do or don't need in the question. And it only asks for the fixed resistors. Okay, so they don't get MP2 because they've added a variable resistor unnecessarily. I think I might have spelled that wrong. I have. No, didn't in the first place. Deary me, sorry. It's rather late over here and I'm wonky. Okay, so that's MP2 that they don't get. Now MP3, if we look, was the correct symbols for the ammeter, voltmeter and fixed resistor. Unfortunately, they are not going to get this marking point. An ammeter is an A inside of a circle, but the wires don't go through the middle. And the same for a voltmeter. Now, if you can see in the diagram, they've actually drawn lines through their components, and that's not right. So no MP3 there. Okay, because they didn't draw those symbols correctly. Okay. MP4. Repeat with a different number of resistors in parallel. So we're going to have to look a bit further at their work here. So we connect a resistor with known resistance, then we connect a variable resistor. This bit isn't correct, but we can ignore anything that's wrong. And we just look for the right things. Okay, so, and we connect them in parallel and connect a voltmeter in parallel as shown by figure 1. We record the readings on the ammeter and voltmeter in the table below and calculate the resistance. Then we calculate the combined resistance using this formula. Then we repeat the experiment by adding another resistor in parallel as shown. So I'm going to take you back to the mark scheme quickly. MP4, repeat with a different number of resistors, and that's here. Okay, so we can tick that one. Now, marking point 5 was a table that includes columns for number of resistors, voltage measured in /V, and current /A. Hopefully you can see, if I show you the table, there's no column for the number of resistors, so they're already not going to get MP5, and also they've put their units in brackets where it actually should be a /. Okay, and ammeter should really be saying current, or I, measured in amps. It should say voltage, measured in V, rather than voltmeter, because you don't write the name of the piece of equipment, you write what you're measuring. Okay, and then it should be resistance in ohms. So there are a couple of issues with their table, so they don't get MP5. Okay, now 6 and 7 were the list of things that you could say to get your extra bonus marks effectively. So one of them comes from saying how the resistance would be calculated. Just back. Now they have actually listed two ways of doing that. They've put one here and they've put one here. Now the good news with CIE is that if you've got one of them right, they will positively mark you. So they will ignore the wrong equation and they will mark the right one. So because they've shown how they would calculate that, they get MP6. But there's nothing else that they've written, so they don't get MP7. Okay, so they have MP6, they don't have MP5, they don't have MP3, they do have MP1, oh I missed one, sorry, and they do have MP4. So you can see that they've got 6, 4 and 1. So I'm going to say they get 3 out of 7. Okay, and I could list the things that they would need to do to get more marks. So I would say they need to correctly add an ammeter and voltmeter with the right symbols. For example, that's one thing they have to do for MP2. For MP3, they need to just use resistors. No need for a variable resistor. Okay. They need in their table to have the number of resistors, and they need to correctly write current measured in amps, and they need to use their /s for their table corrections. Okay, and then obviously they need one of the additional detail points for MP7. Okay, so add more detail for MP7. Okay, so what I now need you to do is I need you to read student 2's answer and student 3's answer. It's exactly the same question with the same mark scheme, and you're looking for those points, and I want you to annotate where you found them and circle the ones that you think they've got, and don't circle the things that they didn't get. Okay, hopefully that makes sense.